Thank you guys for being here and your support. Frank Talks would not be possible without support, and I am so grateful for Williamson Medical Center being our sustaining partner. And let's see, I see Wendy. I see Wendy. Yes, Wendy. And I also see Stacy Wallace as well as Lindsay Sullivan. Thank you guys for your partnership. Renaissance Bank is also our presenting sponsor, and I want to recognize John Bennett, who is our president of the Nashville Renaissance Bank. Thank you, John, for being here. Harrison Crabtree, who is our Williamson County president. Thank you, Harrison. And last month, Diane spoke, Diane LeBlanc. She is also a part of our Williamson County group. Well, our next event is next month, but before we give you dates and details, I'd like for Nancy to come up and give you a Do You Know?
Good morning, everyone. Should you be a first-timer today, well, sometimes at these meetings and events, we have a Do You Know question, and the first person that answers the question correctly by raising their hand and being called on receives a nice prize, because we're having to change that and monitor that a little bit instead of everyone jumping up and down and screaming with the correct answer. But anyway, we appreciate you being here. And so today the question is, what is the only remaining house in Williamson County built by an ex-slave? Okay? Correct. Macklemore House, and up here there is a blanket. That is your prize. Congratulations. But let me share a few things with you in addition to that correct answer being the Macklemore House. And that is Harvey Macklemore bought 4 lots in Hard Bargain in 1880 and built his house. The architecture is Colonial Revival, and it's located at 447 11th Avenue North Franklin. It was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1999, and today it's the home of the African American Museum and is owned by the African American Heritage Society. It's really a jewel. It is becoming more and more popular for tours. There are certain hours and days that it's open for tours, so go by if you haven't. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for being here this morning. So is everybody prepared for the rain this afternoon? I'm just prepared for it not to flood, please. Please. But if you see water, here's your safety lesson for the morning. If you see water standing on the road, turn around, don't drown. Be safe this afternoon. It's really important to think about that over the next couple days. Frank Talks is always held on the second Monday of the month for those of you who this is your first time to attend. We hold it at various locations across the community to give easier access to groups or individuals to attend. It's usually held always around 9 a.m. in the morning with a coffee social, and the coffee this morning is from Highbrow out in West Haven, and I hope you enjoyed it. And then also we start with a 30-minute coffee social, and then our program starts at 9:30 and goes for about an hour. We're excited this morning. We have worked closely in the past with Vanderbilt University, and we appreciate their support for helping us identify speakers and moving forward these topics in our community. Most of you participated recently, or many of you participated in our On the Table event in the fall, and we released the results of that engagement initiative in January and earlier this month. And one of the things that we're trying to do is get people engaged. Our mission is to engage the community, foster collaboration, and then advocate for a shared vision for the future of Franklin. One of the greatest things that came out of On the Table was that almost half of the people who participated in the post-event survey, and that was more than half of the people who participated in the program, said that they met someone new, that their table where they had their conversation was with people they didn't know. Isn't that great? I mean, I think that's wonderful to think that they were willing to put themselves out there, meet new people, and they were also very optimistic about our community. And they said that they want to learn, connect, and engage. They want to learn more about the topics that they discussed at their table. They want to connect with people, and then they want to engage in the community. So we're really looking at ways we're going to address that in 2019, both through programs like Frank Talks or Breakfast with the Mayors, but also additional programs and ideas that will be specific to On the Table. One of those is going to be a civic, book, and media league that we're going to start. And we'll be doing a couple citywide reads, and we're working with Williamson County Public Library, Dolores Greenwald, who's the chair of this event, along with several of our other board members. We'll be looking at books that we'll read together, but also then we're up to suggestions for areas that you might be interested in reading in a smaller group. We're also looking at how we are going to continue the On the Table initiative later this fall, probably in November of 2019. And also, we have, you said you wanted to get more engaged. We have worked with Hands On Nashville and United Way of Williamson County to provide a volunteer link on our homepage. You can go to Get Engaged on our franklintomorrow.org website and find a way that you can identify volunteer opportunities that exist in our community. And if you work with a nonprofit and you're not a Hands On Nashville member, we can post those for you and get those volunteers involved in the community here in Williamson County. So we're excited about that. We are here today, and we've got a great speaker. I'm excited to introduce James Page. He's an engineer by trade and was appointed last year as the Vice Chancellor and Chief Diversity Officer for Vanderbilt University. I'm not going to tell too much of his story, but he's got a good story, and I hope he'll have a little time to tell us a little bit more about himself and what drew him to Vanderbilt and what he's been doing since he's been there. But also, he's going to talk with us today about diversity and inclusion. And so I just want to turn it over to James Page. Okay.
Howdy. So, like I said, I'm pretty new to the area. I've been here since, eventually my slides will come up. I've been here since August of last year. I came from Johns Hopkins, where I was the Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer for Johns Hopkins Medicine and University. Prior to that, I was with DaVita, the dialysis organization. I started off my career at Dell, the computer company, as an engineer. So really excited about being here and talking to you all a little bit about diversity and inclusion. So I came here with my wife and my 3 kids, or 2. I have 2 that are in high school, and my wife and I have a 3rd year who is at Spelman in Georgia. So really excited, really happy to be here, and I'm going to chat a little bit about you with diversity and inclusion. It's going to be interactive, so not only is it going to be interactive, there's also going to be a section where I'm going to ask you to pull out your phones so you can take a selfie of me. No, we're going to use it for a different reason. But I want to just quickly talk to you a little bit about diversity and inclusion. What is diversity? So there are 3 components of diversity I'd like for people to know about. One is, when we talk about diversity, there is the internal dimensions of diversity. Those are the things that we are born with. Then we move from the internal dimensions of diversity and inclusion to external dimensions, those things that we acquire over time. So we look at we move from things such as learning style, ethnicity, race, personality, to external, where we talk about our military status, our personal habits, our decision-making style, work background, income, parental status, and then we move to our organizational dimensions, things such as our title, work location. And when I'm talking to people about diversity and inclusion, one of the questions I usually get is, what is important? What should I be focusing on? And when I'm talking to people about this, usually what I want people to do is move from this kind of concentric circle model to more or less an iceberg. So if we were to move this from being a concentric circle to icebergs, what we're going to find is there are going to be certain things that are going to be above the layer of the iceberg that we can see, certain things that are at surface level that we can figure out, and then there are going to be things that are below the layer of the iceberg. So you're looking at me up on the stage right now, and if we're talking about things that are sitting above the layer of the iceberg, what can you see? What can you figure out? I'm a black man, physical abilities meaning? Yeah, I'm mobile. Yes, I can walk. I speak English. That's one of the things you can figure out. Other things. You know, I want to let you know that it is quite often that I get confused with Denzel Washington and Michael B. Jordan when I'm walking down the street. And when people hear me talk, usually they're like, oh my gosh, you sound just like Barry White with that extremely deep voice. So I'm glad you pointed that out. Okay, so then we move to the lower level of the iceberg, and then we start to get to other things. What could you figure out? Or here's what I like for people to understand. When we start to move to lower level of the iceberg, I did mention my wife, so you may be able to figure out sexual orientation. I mentioned my kids. And not only could you figure it out because I mentioned my kids, but also have all this gray hair, which means that you have to be someone's parent with that much gray hair at this age. Seniority, fraternity, sororities, things like that that you have to talk to people and figure out. And that's one of the things I really like for people to understand. When we're talking about diversity and inclusion, usually the things that are most important are things that are below the layer of the iceberg. And to get to those things that are below the surface layer of the iceberg, you have to what? Talk to people. You have to engage them and talk to people. And that's one of the big lessons that I want people to understand is that to do this work well, you have to engage and talk to people to figure out what's most important. So, quick couple of questions for you. There we go. What is diversity? Define it. How do we define it? You know, the great thing is that I've got a wireless mic and I can come down there and engage you all if I have to. So what is diversity? How do you engage? How do you define it? Differentiations, yes, sir. Anything that's different. So diversity is differences. Great. So we've got diversity. So my next question is, what is inclusion? Those things that are the same. Okay. What else? Accepted, okay. Membership. Who said that? Membership, great. So, next question is, are they the same? No, they're not. So you can have a lot of diversity in the room and not have inclusion. You can have, and I like for people to think of it this way, and you may have heard someone talk about this, is that diversity is being asked to the dance, and inclusion is being asked to dance, right? Whatever that dance is. If you have the old man water sprinkler dance, or if it's the Running Man or the electric boogie, whatever it is, can you do that and feel secure and confident? That's inclusion. So what we need to realize is that if we're doing this work well, if we're really trying to create a tomorrow community, it's more than just different faces in the room, but are those faces truly included? Because inclusion is what keeps you out of trouble. There's been a lot of companies that have done all these creative ads and things of that nature, and they get in trouble, and what they say, we had diversity in the room. Yes, but you didn't have inclusion. So it's critical that we have both diversity and inclusion. One of my mentors, Dr. Roosevelt Thomas, defines diversity as any collective mixture characterized by similarities and differences and related tensions and complexities. Amazing leader, but I want you all to remember diversity is simply similarities and differences, period. If we're going to ask how should we be defining diversity, it is simply similarities and differences. So, pull out your phone. If you want to act, there you go. He'll figure it out. I don't think you can be in presentation mode with this, if that's, are we set? Okay, so pull out your phone, go to menti.com, menti.com, and you're going to type this code, 392755. And you're going to type 3 one-letter words, or one-letter word if you want, 3 words. And the question is, what word would you use to describe Franklin's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion? What one word would you use to describe Franklin's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion? And Chris is going to help me out by refreshing to make sure that we're getting these. That's menti.com. And the code is 392755. There we go. So what's going to happen is that as you are putting in your words, what will happen is that we're going to, it's an interactive word cloud. Now, I don't know if you know how word clouds work, but basically the word that's largest and in the center is kind of the most frequent word, and the ones on the edges. And I'm just kind of interested in your feedback on this. So it looks like ongoing and lacking are big words. Intentional, poor, we're working on it. Superficial. You will have a lot to say. I'm trying to keep up with you. We welcome diversity. It's poor. Engaging, community. Ongoing is this big word that keeps, ongoing and lacking really do seem to have a lot. Half-baked. As you're looking at these, what are your thoughts? Does it seem to be what you expected? Is anyone shocked by what you're seeing up here? No. What, any words that you think are the big words that are in the middle? Are those the ones that seem to really be the what you would expect? Ongoing, lacking, community, intentional, engaging, poor. Do those superficial? That's not only a big word, it's a powerful word. Tell me what you mean by superficial. It doesn't even have to be the people who wrote it, but what do you think they meant when they wrote superficial? The tip of the iceberg. We're just looking at that top level. Is that what I'm hearing? What else? So there is this idea that we're supposed to care. We are. It's something that's supposed to be important. So we're going to give it a little bit of attention, but maybe not quite as much as it really needs. Okay. Anything else?
I think we're good at the Kodak moment, but in terms of going deeper and engaging, that's still very much lacking.
So capturing people where they are at this moment and trying to say, okay, you know what? We're going to put together a group, and we need 2 black folks, an Asian, a gay person, transgender person, 5 white people, and a farmer, and we're okay. That's the Kodak moment. Yes, ma'am.
I guess for me, I'd like to see it more inclusive. I happen now to, and I'm a transplant like you.
Yes.
I now live 5 doors down from the McLemore house, and I don't see my neighbors at community events. I do not see my neighbors downtown Franklin. Mm-hmm. I don't see my neighbors aware or invited to. Even events like this, they probably don't even know about it. And so it seems that we've reached the same people all the time in an effort of inclusion, but our view is narrow. We look around and we see the familiar faces that we always see, but we don't stop and think, what other faces need to be here? How are we inclusive enough that we go into socioeconomic and racial inclusion? You know, everybody here is probably working and at a certain economic level, and you look at those people who are not being included. I look at my neighbors. They don't even know what's going on. When I tell them different things, they don't know. How do we get them in the loop? And not only to the dance, but grab their hand and pull them out of the dance.
That's great. So, this idea of intentional needs to be come to the forefront a little bit more. How do we become intentional around diversity and inclusion, and really honest and expose ourselves to this? Because it's if we're doing this work well, there are going to be pain points, and that's okay. But there are going to be pain points that we're going to have to work through. So as we start to really think about diversity and inclusion in this community, I'm going to make sure that your leaders have this word cloud, because this is your feedback. And I think it's really important that you lean into this a little bit and understand how do you keep leveraging this. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on. I also, one of the things that's really important to understand about diversity and inclusion is that we all have different perceptions. And our perceptions drive our own realities. And sometimes we get to this point where we're arguing about, well, that's really not the case, because how you see things and how I see things are completely different, and your small perception really doesn't represent the whole, or my small perception doesn't represent the whole, but there is this common line between what you think and what I think, even if we're a little bit different. This perception does drive things. And one of the interesting things that Leonardo da Vinci said, all our knowledge has its origins in perceptions. If I ask you, what are you seeing right here? What are you seeing? What's this look like? A cube. A cube. A lot of people are saying cube. Yeah, some people are seeing some people say, well, what I see are circles with shapes in them. And, okay, you see birds' feet. Okay, I see that, birds' feet. Some people say peace signs. And some people will see cubes. Now, what's interesting is that really only thing what we really see up here are just simply circles with patterns in them. And what happens is that our brains decide we're going to fill in the gaps. And we're making references, and we're pulling references from different places, and we're creating a picture that's not really there, but we're filling in the gaps to create whatever picture we're seeing. Now, like I said, it's really not a cube there. There are just 8 circles that are up there. But those 8 circles arrange themselves in such a way that it allows our brain to fill in the gaps to create a story. And there's a cube for those of you that couldn't see it. And what's interesting is that once you see the cube, it's hard to unsee the cube. So once your brain kind of locks that in, it's hard to go back to say, you know what, I don't see that anymore, because your brain has a reference and it has a shortcut that it's taking to fill in the gaps. And we do that all the time. I want you all to think about this word up here. I want you to think about a person, an individual. You got it? Okay. Tall or short? Tall. Okay. Obese, slim, skinny? Fit. Okay. Are they male or female? Male. I'm hearing some rebellious females, but a lot of you are saying male. Okay, are they Asian, Native American, Pakistani, Indian, Cuban, white? You're just saying white. Okay, white. Are they? Tell me about their hair. Gray, short, none. Okay. What are they wearing? What color is the suit? Dark. Do they have what color is the shirt? Do they have a tie on? What color is the tie? Red, okay. There's a point to all this. Are they, tell me about their personal life? Married? I didn't hear what else was said. I'm sorry. They don't have a personal life, just all work. Any other things about their personal life? Golf. Okay, so here's what I did. I went to Google, Yahoo, and Bing, and I typed in the word CEO. I cleared my browser. I went to incognito mode, and I also, and now I don't know if you know how search engines work, but the way they work is kind of a polling engine. The top results are things that are either most clicked or most linked on. So I went to the images after I typed CEO, and I did a screenshot of the images. And here's what came up. So the good thing is that you all were right. Now, what's also interesting is that, like, we have Biff from Back to the Future up here. Don't know how he got up here. I'm just doing a print screen. Okay, but what don't we see up here? Women, yeah. And diversity, people of color. Now, it's also interesting because if you scroll down far enough, you eventually do get a woman, and she's generated billions of dollars, known around the world, kind of one of those names. Any idea who she is? Oprah. Okay, any other thoughts? Okay, great. Any other thoughts? Sheryl Sandberg, okay? Okay, so all of you are wrong. It's not her. I'm going to show you the image so you can actually see it. Do y'all see her? Barbie. In America, we read top to bottom, left to right. Fourth row down, there's Barbie. Right. Now, before we go and get, we said blue suit, white shirt. She's got a phone, big watch, computer, and it even says in pink, CEO Barbie. We're going to ignore the short skirt. And but seriously, what does this say about the fact the first image, when we go to Google and type CEO, the first image that comes up is Barbie? It's creepy, silly, a joke, fantasy, out of the norm, and I'm not too sure if that means Barbie's out of the norm or a female CEO is out of the norm. But either way, it sends a really critical message about diversity and also about what it means when we start to think about some of these important roles within our society. We keep going through, and we said tall or short. I said, you all said tall. Now, it's interesting because less than 15% of American men are over 6 foot tall, yet 60% of corporate CEOs are over 6 foot tall, with 36% of those being 6'2" or taller. There's this halo effect that comes with being tall in America. And the study continued on, and what they found in the study is that every inch above 6'1" you got about a $700 and some difference, increase. So this halo effect is also impacts financially. Now, I told you I started at Hopkins in August of this past year. And I remember Nick Zelpos and his chief of staff and the interview team when I came in. And they were kind of looked at me really strange because I was standing on my tiptoes and wearing platform shoes because I was like, every inch of that $700 some, I'm going to get it. We also said slim, obese. You all said athletic or fit. There's also a bias in America, especially physicians have this bias greatly when we look at people who are obese as well. So in our society, these perceptions really do impact the people's roles, what we think of, who we think are successful, even if we think about presidents of the United States in general, of the United States Army, and the fact that so many of them are over 6 foot tall, this perception, this halo effect is something that continues on. I want you all to think about a doctor or surgeon. Got a picture in your mind? Here we go. This is what came up. This guy right here really didn't like the results. But we also have Dr. House up here. I want you to now think about a nurse. Get the image in your head. Here's what comes up. Is this, I'm going to let you look at it for a second and tell me what you're seeing. Halloween costumes. This idea where it quickly becomes this caricature of a nurse. How it's not, there's a Gallup poll that's done every year. It was done in December of 2018. The most ethical and respected profession in the United States is a nurse. They have to go to school for years. They are the face of healthcare. Yet when we type in nurse, we quickly get to this idea of a caricature of a nurse. And I literally had to stop here because I didn't want to be run off stage by what comes below this. But really think about this. There's another profession that we also get this same kind of quick degradation of the career, even though it's one of the most important professions in our country, and that is school teacher. You get this idea of a snotty teacher as well. Two professions that are female-dominated, two professions that are critical to our success as a country, and the two professions where we quickly see this, what happens in our polling through Google, Yahoo, Bing, etc. Wanted to find some black folks that made some money. So I have a professional athlete. Here's what comes up, and I don't think it's a surprise at all. Now I went and I did just white males. And here's what comes up. Now, there are some very dangerous people up here. But for the most part, this is a clean-cut looking group of folks. You even have up here twice Brad Pitt because he's super white male and he needs his due. But for the most part, a very clean-cut looking group of folks. Now, we also have Carlton here from the Fresh Prince. I'm not exactly sure how he got up here. Again, the only thing I do is hit print screen. So I did white male. Now I'm going to do black males. What am I going to see? Mugshots, rappers, athletes. This is the one slide where I think the search engines did modify the results. Here's what came up. Tell me what you're seeing. A lot of skin. I heard a few people just take a deep breath. A couple of you want to zoom in on a couple of those. Well, at least you're keeping it real. Now I'm going to tell you this is the one slide where well again, this kind of characterization of the black male being a thing more than a contributing member of the society. And again, only thing I did was change one word, white male to black male, and you look at that difference, where you had pretty much profile shots, and you go to this idea of a characterization of the black male. And I will admit, I'm going to let you all know, I did tweak one slide on this, one picture in this slide, and it was necessary. This one right here, I did change. And the reason I did is I had to change the face up because it wouldn't be appropriate for me to have my picture up there all like. Not as a vice chancellor, so I had to put someone else's face up there. Okay, so here's the next question I have for you all. I want you to go back into Mentimeter, and we're going to, Chris is going to help me out by activating the slide. And as soon as we get it activated, I'm going to want you to go back to Mentimeter and type in the one word you think of, comes to mind when you hear Franklin, Tennessee. Are we active, Chris? Okay, great. Boy, this is deep. Yeah, it's honest. So, looks like white, wealthy. I saw Confederate, Southern, quaint, traffic, war. The traffic caused the war? Confederate soldiers, countryside, safety, honest, stereotypical. What are y'all thinking when you're looking at this? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Spot on. Anything shocking that you're seeing up here? And again, this is a place where I think maybe we'll come back and have a different type of format. I'm not a huge fan of auditorium theater style because it doesn't allow me to get in the middle of you all. And it's hard to create the kind of safety necessary to have important conversations. But as you're looking at these, you can be honest. Any shock, feedback, thoughts, or disappointment? Yeah, friendly is about the same size as Confederate, growing, affluent, rich, wealthy. It's interesting as well. If you take out the Confederate type of sentiments, I did had the same conversation with the folks at Vanderbilt. And these words and the words for Vanderbilt are very similar. This idea of white, wealthy, affluent, Southern, friendly, but charm. But we also have to protected bubble. That's interesting. Little word right here, but a big word. Can y'all see that? Racist. So that means that our ability to engage and include every member of our community is not quite, I don't think, where we want it to be. We have some opportunities to do things a lot more intentionally and better. So, again, I'm going to give this to your president, and hopefully you all will be able to lean into this a little bit more and peel this back, because I think there's a lot of work that you could do. It could be. I absolutely recognize not only my talk, but even my title. The fact that I would come on here and if it was more than vice chancellor, or let me be frank, since we're having a frank talk, is that I think that even if I was not a diversity guy and I came up here to this audience and started speaking, I think the black-white would somewhat play out. Now, this is a very inexpensive or free tool And maybe one of the things that you do in the future is that you use Mentimeter in another session and see how it evolves, how it changes, do different speakers pull different words. I think that if it was a white male standing up here giving this talk, you probably wouldn't see white up here. But it also is part of, again, frank talk, white privilege. The fact that there's a bubble that is created if a white male was giving this talk where you wouldn't have to recognize the privilege that was in the room. But I think simply because of my presence as a black male on stage, and I don't think I've created necessarily this, some diversity leaders come in and you are just like, it is black, white. That's not my style. I want people to discover these things. But there is a reality, I think, that we come to. Great question. Thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate it. Any other feedback or thoughts there? I think you're right, but I also think that simply, again, my presence as a black male on the stage forces us to come to that realization. Again, if it was, I agree with what you're saying. If it was a white male on the stage, the privilege would allow that conversation to not necessarily happen in the same way. Now, I'm not going to say it wouldn't be up here. I just think it would be a little bit different. Now, what I don't see up here that I did see at Hopkins, at Vanderbilt, is this idea of diversity. At least I don't think I see it. Because even at Vanderbilt, when I did this, there was still this aspiration of diversity, that it was on the radar, that it was an intentional part of where we strive to be. And I don't quite see that up here. Yes, ma'am. I think that it could, but I also think that it is, for there to be good balance, for it to work really well, you need inclusion. My office is equity, diversity, and inclusion. So equity is the first part. And I think the first slide that I put up was equity, diversity, and inclusion. But I think you need all pieces for there to be balance. It could be, yeah, you could. But also one of the things I would hope to see up here then is that the one word that we're aspirationally striving for would be inclusion or diversity or equity. And again, I'm trying to read a whole lot in a very... Well, welcoming people, that is one phrase. But I don't see equity, diversity, or inclusion up here. So I'm not saying it's good or bad. What I am trying to say is that as we move forward, this idea of being intentional with where we're striving to become is an important item. I've got way too many slides, so we're not going to get through all of them. But the next word I'm going to put up here is Franklin, Tennessee resident. Google, Yahoo, Bing, type in Franklin, Tennessee resident. What am I going to see? White, males, retired, affluent, school system, okay, celebrities. Okay, so you're going to see a white family walking down the street with a very expensive, are they going to have 2.5 dogs? A half a dog? I got you. Any other thoughts? Now, here's where I challenge you all. I really didn't type this one in because this is the bias that you bring. As you start to think about what a resident in our community looks like, this is the bias that sits in your mind. And it's not a good thing or a bad thing, but we need to be intentional that this is the bias that we're working with. I've got, are you sure? Okay. Okay, we'll keep talking then, and y'all can just tell me to hush up. So God terms within culture. In every community, every organization, every gathering of folks, there are these things called God terms, G-O-D terms. What these are terms that are so important, they can make things that are less important be significant or of importance. Now, when I'm explaining to people about God terms, usually, let me just show you the definition. Leaders, one of the quotes, leaders prioritize what's important to them. Leaders' priorities demonstrate what's important to the organization. So when I'm thinking about God terms, I like to think about the second Bush administration, not being political at all, but there was a God term that was used during the second Bush administration. And during that, using that God terms, new appropriations were created, departments were shut down, some departments were started. Our fundamental rights as Americans were significantly shifted as we gather in public or airports and things of that nature. And what's interesting is almost no one in Congress pushed back on President Bush. And it wasn't because he was such an incredible, powerful, strategic leader. It was because they didn't want to be against the God term that was behind him. And at that time, that God term was what? Patriotic. Homeland security, terrorism, all these things that kind of meant, if you think about 9/11, what happened in this huge God term that gave him significant powers to get things done. Now, what I believe is that every community, every organization has God terms. And it's critical that you understand what those God terms are and how you leverage them, kind of in the same way that President Bush did to further what's important or to get things off the table that's not important. Now, if we think about, I spent a lot of time doing this work within healthcare. If we're thinking about healthcare, a couple of God terms in healthcare: patient safety, controlling costs, joint commission certification, magnet certification. All those things are really important within healthcare. They're so important that if someone came up to you and said, you know, I really think healthcare is important, but you know that patient safety thing, you'd look at them and think, okay, that makes no sense at all. So as you start to think about your community, I'm going to challenge you to really think about what are the God terms within your community, and how do you leverage the God terms to intentionally grow the community in the direction you want it to go. Now, again, I'm short on time. Otherwise, we do a whole exercise where we tease out the God terms, and I'm going to keep us moving forward. But I really want you to think about what are your God terms. This is an exercise I took a healthcare organization through, and these are some of their God terms. But it is really important that you think about these things. We've talked about unconscious bias and the fact that our brain is a prediction machine. It looks for shortcuts. Some of those shortcuts, we saw the cube in the mind, or we saw the bird feet or peace symbols, because our brain looks for patterns. It tries to associate things. We keep going through, and I'm going to skip through this. And because of this prediction nature of our brain, there's also a rule book. And this rule book helps us understand things such as, okay, here's our book of rules, here's a schema, and because of that, we're going to get a certain expected pattern. Now, if we think about this, we've got rules, schema, and a background. Now, this is so significant that we start to create connections and patterns and believe that things are correct, even if they are not. I'm going to give you a quick example. I told you that my wife and I have 3 kids. We have 2 girls, then we got a boy after that. And I was like, I need a boy. I came from a house of 5 boys. Boys are important to the world, and they're page boys and need a boy. So we had our 2 girls, and I was an expert, y'all, at parenting. My girls would, we would go out to eat, and my girls would be at the table, and they would think about doing something they shouldn't do. And I had a look. It went something like this. And the girls would start to tear up and straighten up, and everything would be perfect because I did that. I mean, that's pretty intimidating in case y'all didn't realize it. And we would go out with our friends, and they would have their kids, their boys, and their boys would be doing the California Wiggle down the movie theater or climbing up the walls and standing on the tables of restaurants. And my girls would start to think about doing that, and I'd give them a look. And they would just, sit there and be good. And my wife and I were so good about this that we started to even think about starting a school, classes. We were going to call it something like the Page Institute of Making Sure Your Badass Kids Act Good Out in Public. That was the technical name of the school that we were going to be starting. I forgot that this is being streamed live somewhere. Guess I got to watch my language a little bit. Sorry about that. So we were really good at this. Until God decided that I was going to get my wish and I was going to get a boy. And we got a boy. And not only did we get a boy, we named the boy James because we wanted him to, it's this boy thing. And we would go out and he would be thinking about doing something and I'd give him that look. And he'd give me the look right back. And I'm thinking, what in the heck? And then I realized what happened is that my parents cursed me. And they looked at me when I was younger and they said, I hope you get one just like you. And that's what happened. So what happened is I had this book of rules and a schema that the kids would be concerned and do what I want because I gave them look. And I had a background that proved it, but my whole book, schema was based on a false premise. So we have to make sure that we're understanding the rules that we make assumptions around. Now, there are 3 types of bias that I want you to keep in mind. So there's rater bias, structural bias, and calibration bias. 3 different types of bias. The first bias, rater bias. Rater bias is a change in judgment that it can occur when a person allowed their preformed biases to affect their evaluation of another. When we think about rater bias, there's an exercise. I want you to quickly think about this. I want you to think about 5 people you trust. Okay? They can't be family members. We're not going to share it, but I want you to think about 5 people you trust who are not family members. You got them? Now, I want you to think about this. Their race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and I want you to think about yourself as well. Their parental status, the age of their kids, their education, where they live, their religion. Is anyone seeing any patterns? They're all like who? Me, right? So when we start to think about this rule book, this schema, this idea of rater bias, we have to understand that our rating of individuals is influenced by who we are. This idea of trust. When we're building teams, no one builds a team and says, you know what, I want a team, but I'm not too sure if I really need to trust them. No one says that at all. And our influence, our picture of trust is based on who our trusted 5 historically has been and who these folks that we're going to be working with in the future. The second one is structural bias. It's pursuing the group's interests even when situations where there's no obvious personal benefit. The effect of favorite relationships and in-group bias operating at an unconscious level. I want you to think about and see if you've ever been in this situation here.
We have got to cut costs, people. Ideas.
We could open an account on FedEx.com, save 10% on online express shipping.
Okay, how about this? We open an account on FedEx.com, we save 10% on online express shipping.
That is wonderful. You just said the same thing I said, only you did this.
No, I did this.
Makes all the difference.
Bingo. That's good.
Right on the nose.
That's really good.
Who has ever been in that situation? Absolutely. Tell me what happened. What happened in that situation? It's not what says, it's who says it. Okay, keep going. What was happening? What happened in the room? Groupthink. Okay, what else? Power. Okay, tell me about that. Power, in what way? The powerful person got their attention. Who is the powerful person? Who is the boss? The tall white guy. How did you? The tall white guy with the suit on and the white shirt and the red tie. Okay, how did you know he was the boss? Head of the table, okay. He did this, not this, okay. He asked the question. He started off the meeting. Now think about this. All these things came because our perception of what a boss looks like, where a boss is supposed to sit, is part of our schema. That's part of our mental calibration and bias. Now, it could have been it would have been hard, but it could have been the first guy could have been the boss. But if he was the boss, you ought to have said what? What would you all have thought about him as a leader? Not effective at all, right? So our schema, our rule book says that person, the boss, sits at the head of the table. They have this perfect salt and pepper hair. They wear a suit. They're the one that speaks up. They speak confidently, even if it's not correct. I'm going to show you another quick ad. This is an ad that was done for a pharmaceutical company a couple of decades ago. Now, if you read this ad, what does it say? It's not a hard thing to understand. What's this ad say? Got sick, took the medicine, feel better. Now, this ad actually did very well when it was released. Except when they took it global, it started to really falter in Asia, in Japan specifically. Why did it falter in Japan? Okay, there's this bias with his eyes. You're right about that. Any other reason? His clothing. It's not a well-defined ad, but it was a couple of decades ago. Any other thoughts? And your bias is coming into play right now. Exactly. What? In America, we read left to right. In Japan, they read right to left. So the ad did not say, feel sick, take our medicine, feel better. It said, you feel great. Take our medicine, you feel like crap. Pfizer, right? No, I mean, that's so our bias affects even how we see something as simple as that ad. The final kind of bias I want to talk about is the idea of the group, a measurement between a group and the actual value of something that's seen. What's your name here? Frank, how are you doing? Where are you from? See, I walk up to Frank, and before I even stuck my hand out, Frank stuck his hand out and gave me a handshake, right? Now, if I was to come up to you and you're trying to figure this out, I stuck out my left hand, and she's like, okay, what do I do with it? Now, we assign a lot of value to a handshake in America. Tell me the qualities of a handshake in America. A good handshake, firm. It seals the deal, okay? Firm, it seals the deal. What are the qualities of a good handshake in America? Intentional, eye contact. I am really messing with the camera people right now because I was told, do not come off stage, and here I am. Okay, what else? Short. It's not one of who's been in like an all-day long handshake, and it's like, wow, will you please just let go of my hand? Any other thoughts of a good handshake in America? Firm is a good handshake, okay? Any other thoughts? Not sweaty. You know, it's like, who's got like a clammy handshake? It's like, did you just stick your hand in the toilet and shake my hand? Any other thoughts? Now the question is, what's the true value of a handshake in America? What's the true value of a handshake in America? What's it truly mean? Trust? Why? Well, a lot of people have broken that trust with me. I got you. Okay, so trust. Any idea of the true, other thoughts with the true value of a handshake in America? Okay, sometimes it's evolved. It's evolved. Now, there was a company that I've worked with in the past. They were interviewing candidates, and one of their qualities that they'd measure on a 1 to 5 scale was handshake. So the client would come in, shake their hand, and it's like, okay, 1 to 5. That was a good, short, firm, unsweaty, eye contact, handshake, 5. You got the job. What's that? Smiling. Oh, okay, so you think about this. Is that even a good way to hire someone? In the Philippines, there's something called monopole. And what monopole is a way of greeting folks. And the way you do it is that you walk up to someone, you reach out, you take their hand, you don't look them in the eye, you don't square up with them, you touch their back of their hand to your forehead because it's the most, two of the most sacred parts of the body. You walk away, you don't look at the person, and that is the handshake. Now, if we're calibrating that, we say creepy, but it's different. Not creepy, it's different. But if we're calibrating that, we'd say, okay, that's a 1 at best. So we've assigned all these values to a handshake, but it's really not. So what we have to do is make sure that when we are calibrating individuals, we're calibrating on items that are truly important, that are important to calibrate. What is this?
I have an appointment with...
I'm out of time, right? Okay, so I'm going to stop right there because I put way too much in there. Either that or you all talk way too much. Any quick questions, thoughts, or concerns for me? Yes.
I look at the term diversity. Do I need the mic?
I think it's being recorded, so probably
Okay.
so.
I look at the term diversity and it makes me sad that we even have to talk about it because basically everybody's different from me, right? When I think about my singular uniqueness and everyone else's singular uniqueness and the fact that we have to be taught about embracing diversity when diversity is who we all are. We all are different from each other and unique. And you look at the things that we have in common, you know, our humanity, and we all have eyes and nose, and we all want the same things, and our hearts are the same. And so it's just a comment that I'm sad we have to be taught to embrace it and be inclusive.
Yeah,
it just makes a statement about us.
And that's one of the reasons that the definition of diversity that I showed you all was similarities and differences. So that means that you can have a room full of 6-foot-tall, straight, cisgender white males and have diversity in the room. I'm recognizing that. It doesn't necessarily mean we have inclusion, but you can have diversity with that. So that's why we use the definition of similarities and differences. But no matter what diversity, inclusion, equity we're going for, this idea of being intentional and making sure we're getting what we want and what we need is critically important. Any other thoughts or questions or comments? Yes, sir.
There are 3 members of the media here. I wish there were members of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen here. Symbolism is so important these days. In the 2010 census, only 4% of us were born and raised here. That's the census that's almost 9 years old.
Yeah.
On the Franklin Town Square, there's a Confederate monument. On that Confederate monument's base, that monument sits on where the slave auction used to be. The Board of Mayor and Aldermen is struggling with a request to put at least one historic marker there that the slave market used to be here. With 96% of the population not being from here, how do we implement diversity in common sense and governmental decisions?
So I think that having these type of bold conversations, probably a little bit more intimate and not as much lecture, but getting people to really talk about some of these things, leaning into some of those word clouds that we did are critically important, because this is not an easy subject. If you walk, again, right now I'm just kind of lecturing, but if we were to have a conversation, some of you all would be challenged, and that's okay. Hopefully most of us would be challenged in where we stand right now. Also, to make progress, it means that we are going to be uncomfortable in some ways. So being uncomfortable is not a bad thing either. And the final thing I'd say is that diversity and inclusion also means that we'll have to take some bold actions at times. Not always popular actions, but this idea of bold actions is also really important. Any other questions, comments, or thoughts? Okie doke. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Page. So nice to see you.